Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Wanaka Oberhuber, and my guest today is Michael Wilson. Hi.
Hi.
So wonderful to have you here. And we've been planning this for a while, and I'm so happy that this is the day.
It's wonderful to be here. It's certainly a thrill. That's the truth, but it's also a quote from the Beatles.
Cool. Yeah. So let's start. So, Michael, I would like to hear how you got to seeing the world the way you do today, your journey. You need to unmute.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. What I've said is that I woke up in Southern California at the age of let's see. So in 1967, I reckon, maybe 6. Yeah. I woke up on LSD, and I saw the sacred geometry of everything, and I knew that it was real, and that I'd finally woke up. And I didn't even have those kind of terms in my mind at the time, but that's what it was like. And then I went through a wonderful period for about two more years, learning a lot and having wonderful experiences. And then before that happened, I had around that time of my awakening, I had the Selective Service System in our country requested that I report for my pre-induction physical. And there was a big war going on in Southeast Asia. You know, we were trying to protect ourselves from the Vietnamese people. So, I wasn't interested, and so I reported for my physical, carrying a sign that's saying, "No, I won't," and handing out leaflets to all these young inductees pouring off the buses from hither and yon to come to the Oakland Induction Center, telling them why I wasn't going and wasn't buying it. So what happened then was 2 years that the FBI kept me under some form of surveillance, but I soon after that I just completely lost interest in politics and was all about love and happiness. And so anyway, they came to my house with guns drawn, my mom's house. I was visiting her. That's the only way they found me, because they didn't know where I lived. But I came to visit, and the neighbors turned me in. So they came with their guns drawn and put me in jail. And my mom came, and they worked all that out and released me on my own recognizance to appear in San Francisco in 10 days to stand to be arraigned. So, but before all that was happening, I had these wonderful revelations that had already started, and they came in various forms. But I really had a very active spiritual life going on. So I asked for guidance about it, and now we would say the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit said, you're going to go up there to San Francisco, and you need to find a nonprofit organization that where you can live and work for room and board, where you can be of service. And you also are going to plead guilty, and you're going to they're going to give you a public defender, and everything's going to go fine, and you're going to get probation for 2 years to do service work with this nonprofit organization. So I just knew what was going to happen. And I went up to San Francisco, and all the cool places that I checked out were just very loosely organized. And I knew they were not it. And there was only one place that finally I had left in my back pocket. And that was this woman that I'd met the previous December. So now it's like April. And I met her in December in a coffee house on Haight Street. And she was wearing a blue robe, and she was just so present and so full of light. And I knew that whatever organization she was with, that was the one that I had to hook up with. So it was the last day, I had to report on Monday, and it was Saturday, and I had to find something. So I went back to that coffee house on Haight Street. It was pretty early in the morning, like maybe 10 o'clock or something. And so they were open, and I looked in the window. They had a big plate glass window. The place was called Brother Juniper's Inn. And I looked in the window, and it was just a sea of young white males, mostly in Catholic clerical garb, sitting at all the tables. I guess because they were members, they could get free coffee there. So I went in the front door, and I just kind of like put my blinders on. I don't want to see that. And I looked straight ahead, and at the very back of the room, with her back to the wall at a little table facing the door, was the woman that I met earlier, looking up with a big smile. And she was wearing clerics too. Well, I just made a beeline for her and sat down opposite her at the table and sat down and said, I want to join. And that was pretty funny. So she told me where to go, and she told me who to ask for, and all that. And afterthought, I said, do I have to cut my hair? She said, no, don't worry about that. Okay, but everybody else is there, short hair and everything. So I went over to what was called the Fillmore aid station, and knocked on the door, and I hear this energetic movement from behind the door, running down the stairs, opens the door, and there's this big, beautiful black man smiling at me, and he says, hi. And I said, I want to find myself. That's what she told me to say. I want to find myself. And he just laughed. He thought that was so funny, and brought me upstairs. And that's how I found myself. It started right there that day. But, I never even heard of the self. I've been reading a few things, but I didn't really, the idea that there was another self had never crossed my mind. And it was a few, maybe 6 weeks later, that a brother who had just come into self, yes, we had initiations there. and you could come into self. And he took me for a walk, and he told me about this, and I was like, he seemed so proud of himself, and I was kind of well, I probably was jealous, but it upset me to hear that there was another self. At least at first it did. I thought, what kind of game is going on here? But anyway, I just stayed because the light was there. It was so ever present. And I'd also met the founder of the order. Well, kind of. I'd seen him. And he reminded me of, I thought I'd seen him before, and I thought it was in my childhood, like really early, so that I would not consciously remember. But he looked so familiar. Anyway, in this religious order, okay, there's a thing called sacramental initiation. That's using the sacraments. And we had a very strict regime. So we would get up early every morning, 5 o'clock, 5:30, and be done in chapel meditating, 6 o'clock communion, 7 o'clock breakfast, 8 o'clock go to work, outside jobs in the world. Come back home around 5 o'clock, and it's silence in the house. It's silence in the house until breakfast, silence in the house from 5 to 6, dinner at 6, classes 7 to 9, then prayers at 10, silence after 10, 11 o'clock, lights out. Every day except Sunday. A little more relaxed on Sunday. Fast 1 day a week, 36 hours. From dinner to the next, the following day's breakfast, Anyway, that was our regime. And, it was just so, the truth was there, being taught every day. And what happened? There, okay. And so, after some time, so many miracles happened. Like hearing about the self, I would meditate, and always this white light would just come like rising up, and I would see it, then it would go away, and then I would see it and go away, and I was trying to focus on it all the time. And I connected that with Venus because all that summer was like, it was either the evening star or the morning star, and it was just outside my bedroom window, and it was like the sun and the wind, the rain it never rained all summer except at night, and when we were sleeping. And I remember one day walking up in the park that I would go to on the way home from work, and there were dark clouds all the way around San Francisco. This is 1969. And it was raining, but not in the city. It was crazy. It was just a magical time. So we had the initiation of illumination. And you were brought into the light at the altar. So I've had this happen. I came home. I had this amazing vision when I was meditating at noon on my job, sitting in a forklift. I had this beautiful vision, and I came home and I asked my teacher about it, and it was like a symbol I'd never seen before. And he said, well, it just means you're coming into balance. So anyway, that night of prayers, he brought me into the light. Next morning, I said, well, I haven't been baptized yet. You should probably do that if it'd be okay. He said, well, you don't really need it now, but if you want to be baptized, we'll do that in the morning. So I got baptized. After breakfast, and we got everything we needed to get done, I went outside with another couple of brothers, and we're walking down the street, and everybody that I saw had a bright golden disc right in their solar plexus. And it was so bright that I didn't even notice the bodies. I was just seeing the self in all these people. It didn't last, a long time, but it was just incredible. So, this happened all when I was in my, I started at age 24. By the time I was almost 27, I was ordained a priest. And what was the most important thing for me? There were several things, but probably the most important thing was that I had this devotion, So when Jesus talks about the altar inside, that's really how it is. And I think that you have to have that. I don't think you can live without it. You can't be conscious without that. And so that's the most important thing. It's important to learn, whatever path you're on, it's important to learn the course. But without that devotion, I don't think you can ever reach the goal. And I think that, so things that I learned, things that my teacher taught, that the order taught, is that, for example, the baptism that we are familiar with in church, that was the baptism of the Piscean Age. Okay, so that started around the time of Jesus' ministry back in the day. But we were in the beginning of the Aquarian Age, and the baptism of the Aquarian Age was the illumination. So everyone in this age is going to come into the light. If they don't, they're just going to have to leave the planet because they're just too dense. Everyone's coming into the light. The planet's coming into the light. And the light is real. It's not, quote, the light of understanding. That's not it. It's real. So we just, we realize who we are in the light. Everything happens in the light. And so your whole atmosphere, extending out way beyond your physical body, is full of light. And you become, you start to identify that whole thing as you. Not just your body, your physical body, that sort of disappears in the light. It's just this being of light that you are. And that's the Son of God. And we also understood that the word Christos means both S-O-N and S-U-N. And so in our teaching, which is not important, it doesn't matter, but in our teaching, the sun in the solar system was, the Christ body for our solar system. And so all the light, life, and love pouring through the sun to the entire solar system is what keeps it moving, keeps it alive, keeps it working. Well, that was a good thought, because we have that same self inside of us. And we're like the microcosm to the macrocosm. So after I'd had all the classes, and I'd gone through the New Testament and written what I had to say about every chapter, I did all that. I didn't have to go to class anymore. And one of the things that we learned was we called it street patrol or street mission. And we would go out in pairs on the streets of San Francisco. We go to the roughest, toughest places in town in our clerics, and we would just walk down the street. But we weren't just walking down the street. We would start at the altar, the symbolic one where you're on your knees. And we would start there and say a prayer for this ministry, and then we would go out. We weren't proselytizing or anything like that. We were just there to bring the light into the darkness. And so we would just walk the street, and we might say hi to people sometimes, but we that's about it. Unless somebody had a problem, came to us, or we saw a problem, then we might deal with it in a non-obtrusive way, usually. One time, one of my teachers described what he did when he went on street patrol. In his mind, he imagined that he was like a steamroller, and he spread his atmosphere out so that it covered both sides of the street and the stores on both sides of the street. And he just rolled this light as he walked along. Blessing the whole place. And we would be out there for 2 hours. Well, actually, yeah, we could be out even longer, 3 hours. And we'd stay in the same area. And, we would attract, the light would attract things. Sometimes it would attract things that needed to happen, and it would happen right where we were, so that we could witness it, and we could call the light down to cleanse, whatever negativity was there. So the experiences that we had on patrol were awesome, and I just loved to be out on the street. After I'd had all those classes, I didn't really feel like I needed to stay at home anymore. It was time to go to work. So after I'd been in this order for 9 months, they sent me on mission, and there were 4 of us that went to different cities, and we were supposed to start a new center. Just following this pattern that I've been doing. Well, I wasn't ordained yet, and I was concerned about that, and it was a whole new thing. We'd never had any missionaries before, so we were sort of making it up as we went along. And I knew the communion service by heart. And I bought a little chalice, a little brass chalice at a world market place, and a little plate. And when I got to where I was going, and it was Louisville, Kentucky, I set up a little altar. I bought a little picture of the master that I took with me, where he was like African American image, and it was really beautiful, kind of modern, not like the ones we had in the center. And I made a cross in the wood shop, and so I had all this together, and I just started serving communion like the priest did. And I did that for, I don't know, a month or so before they finally sent something out saying, here's a missionary communion. So then I had to say, I'm not a priest, so I can't do this. I can't do the transmutation. Because what happened, this is why it was sacramental initiation. It was so amazing. We had the awareness that it really wasn't so the wine was infused with the presence of the Holy Spirit. But what the transmutation really was the priest was transformed. You know, bringing down the Holy Spirit and filling the bread with light, and filling the wine with consciousness, and when you took this communion, it really opened you up. So it really worked, you know. It wasn't like any communion you'd ever had before. So it was alchemy, right? So there's lots of ways for these things to happen. And there really are some like old things going on the planet, things that have been happening for millennia, magic, but not the magic of pharmaceuticals, you know. So that's a different way than the Course in Miracles. At least it appears to be different, right? But how could it be different, right? In reality, it couldn't be any better, you know. So the founder died after just a few years. I'm not sure if it was 73 or 74. And Easter, actually Good Friday. And I tell you, things started to change pretty quickly. Anyway, at some point, I left. And by this time, I was married to a priest. We had two kids, 2 sons. So it was really hard for me to do that. But the order had changed so much that I'll tell you what, the people who stayed went Eastern Orthodox. So they had this teaching. So we were like non-denominational, non-sectarian. We studied all the religions of the world. We were not any, you know, there was no sin, you know, many things that the order taught. I mean, that the Course teaches, they were, you know, all part of our teaching. So I really was unable to find anything to replace it with. And I thought that I was going to do this my whole life. But that's not the way the cards went. They weren't dealt like that. And we all had to find our own way in the world. My teacher came to me in 1980 after I left the order. The one that died in 74 came to me, and it was a dream. It was one of those kinds of dreams where something happens to wake you up right then at the end of the dream, and you can't, it's, there was a noise outside, loud noise. And he just came and said, choose a good thing to do and do it. That's all he said. Well, so I ended up getting into social work, and I did that for 21 years. And about halfway through that, my marriage fell apart, and so I got divorced, and that was probably the hardest thing that had ever happened to me. And then I had my second awakening. That's when I first found the Course. But I used it in a really different way. I didn't study the Course. I had these Course teachers, early Course teachers that had recorded with beautiful music. They made recordings of excerpts from the Course that were very reassuring and everything, that really helped me to get through that time. But I didn't study the Course. And it was a long time until I did. And it took me a long time to really let go of the idea that there wasn't going to be another order like that, and I wasn't going to create that. And I had a lot of help, of course, along the way. But when this divorce came along, the awakening was that, well, first of all, I was really angry, and I could, this anger was it wasn't helping anything. And I had to, and I finally got into therapy for the first time in my life. And after like around the fourth visit, I noticed what he was saying whenever I'd come in. The therapist said, well, how are you feeling today? And I've been telling him my story and all this stuff and telling him what was happening. I never really heard him say, how are you feeling? So then I understood. I had to take my meditation skills and I had to apply it to my feelings. I had to focus on the anger. So I created my own therapy, which was that every time, and I knew that I was the one that was creating the anger. I was making that. Every time I would think about the divorce and all the details, it would make me angry. And so I knew that I was going to have to stop thinking about that. But in the meantime, I had to stop whatever I was doing. Whenever I get angry, I had to stop and just close my eyes like I was in prayer and feel the anger. Not express it, just feel it. So that would happen several times during the day. No matter what I was doing, if I was driving down the road, I would pull over. That went on for a month. And finally, one day, I was sitting by the side of the road in my car and feeling the anger. And it was like the bottom dropped out. And I like fell into this deep sadness. That's what the anger was doing for me. It was protecting me from this deep sadness. And so I started feeling that. And I felt that the same way for about 3 weeks. And one day I was feeling that, and the bottom dropped out of that. And all I could feel was love. And I realized that that was me. So that's when everything started to change again. So finally in 2003, this woman that I met back in the 80s, and I just, as soon as I saw her, I felt like I knew her, I knew her. And so I became her friend, and, we kept this friendship over the years. And finally, she agreed that we could get together. So, the first thing she did was introduce me to Amma, the hugging saint. And we went to a retreat that lasted 3 days in the East Bay, a big ashram that they have there. They call it the MA Center, which stands for her name, Mata Amritanandamayi. And so we went there, and I had a really direct and deep communion with Amma. And so I started learning. I learned her meditation technique and integrated Amrita meditation. I am. It's called I am. And then in 2005, I went to stay at the ashram in India for about 2 months. And again, really deep connection with Amma. And she gave me a name, and gave me a mantra and all that stuff. So while I was there, I get this guidance, loud and clear: study A Course in Miracles. And as soon as we got back home, I told my wife, and as soon as we got back home, so we've been home like a couple of days, she gets this Sounds True catalog in the mail, and on the back cover is Gary Renard, a double CD course, kind of like short, 4-hour teaching, and it was on sale. And so she immediately ordered it. came right away. And this was the basic teaching, that's in The Disappearance of the Universe. And it was so beautifully done. It was just amazing. Everything that I knew and believed was there. And that's how I started with the course. So I went to Gary's website, and I found out he was coming to Portland, where I lived. He was coming to Portland in a few months, and there was a link to. So I clicked on that, and it turned out that took me to the website of the person who was bringing him to Portland, and I contacted him by email, and we had lunch the next day. And I because I said, I want to help you with this, anything I can do, I want to help. And we had lunch, and he's telling me, I really haven't found a study group nearby. The closest one is in another town, like half an hour away. And so I said, well, let's start one. And so we got started right away, even before Gary, before he came. And it went for like 17 years. We finally stopped this year. And I'm doing other stuff, but why I love the chorus, okay, it's not, it's like, it didn't bring me to Jesus. It didn't do, it didn't give me the initiations. I already had those a long time ago, but everything was there, and by this time, I wanted to see something that was so democratic, that it had no hierarchy. There weren't any priests, there weren't any special teachers, none of that. It was for everybody. And my name, spiritual name, it comes from a teacher back in the 2nd century who was a great Gnostic teacher. And if you went to his school, of course, they had communion every day and everything. I'm sure it was a really hot place to be. Everybody served communion. There were just brothers, and you could be a novice. You could have just come in, been there a week, but if they pulled your name, then you served communion. It was like there was so much faith in this place that it was going to work. It was bound to happen. That's the way the place was set up, and that's the way the course is set up too. It's like there's no time, there's no space. Everything is here now, in this holy instant. And we make it holy. We, the Son of God, we make it holy by our devotion. That's how it's always been. It's your turn.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing so much about your journey and how you even became a priest on this whole journey, and are a priest, and Now you have all this knowledge from A Course in Miracles on top of what you had before, and also the wonderful experiences you had with Amma and other such people, right? It's amazing. It's like so powerful. I think there's many people out there who can relate with every single step of your journey. I certainly haven't had anyone who said they were a priest here yet on the podcast. I have had reverends, but they didn't call themselves a priest. So you're the first to tell me that story. Yeah, so let's go deeper into these teachings, into A Course in Miracles, and how you describe holiness and the holiness of all of us, because you were explaining how in your years with the order you had seen the solar plexus of people shining so brightly. Those were first inklings of how holy we all are, right? Now, I would like you to go a bit deeper into that topic.
Okay. So one of the phrases that we learned was stand in the light of Christ. And that was a command for the light to appear. And we sometimes had occasion to use that when things were out of balance. One time, I'd been out on patrol with a friend of mine, a brother, and we were on our way back to the house. We were only like 2 blocks away from our main center, and in San Francisco. And we come across one of our brothers who's being held up. There's a guy with a gun pointing at him, and he wants all of his money. Well, this particular brother had a secret cache. And so his family was always giving him money. So we would like get 50 cents a week allowance on Saturday. And we would do things like we would go to the movie theater and we would ask them if they had a ministerial discount. And lots of times they would just let us in for free. So we would make that 50 cents last, and that's how it was for everybody. So here he was. Turns out he was going I don't know what he was doing, but he had $800. We didn't know this, of course, but he did, and he was being held up by this guy with the gun. So he was really losing it. He was really afraid. And we came up and walked right into the scene. Okay, now the guy's like, what am I going to do now? I've got 3 of them. And I just told the brother who was being held up to leave. I said, you just go on home. We'll take care of this. And now here's this guy, and he's like, and we're like, stand in the light of Christ. And then Gene, my brother, he starts kind of like putting his hands up like this and backing away, like, be cool, man. I'm leaving. Okay. So I just looked at the guy and I said, it's over. and turned my back and walked away. I heard the gun click twice. It jammed. He just ended up running away. And stuff like that happened. So that was one of the things that we learned. We learned that, we learned the power of the word. That was one of the it's one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit that's given to us. If we stay centered in ourselves, nothing, as Jesus says in the Course, nothing can harm us. Nothing can assail us. So, times on patrol, I remember going, when I was out on mission, first time, I walked by this bar, and it happened to have a really big front plaza kind of in front of it, and it was in a rough part of town. So there was, it was on the weekend, or there would be fights and stuff. Well, there was some big commotion, big fight in the bar. It tumbled out into the front, and somebody had, at the same time, somebody had stopped me because I was just walking by. Somebody stopped me and engaged me in conversation right in front of the bar. So I'm standing there talking to this person and watching all this stuff happen. And it all got resolved. I never had to do anything. I didn't have to say anything. It just all came pouring out. And then it righted itself within 5 minutes. It was the most interesting experience. And the whole thing was just like peace. And all I was doing was just witnessing, just standing there. It's just the presence, the Christ presence is with us. If we know it, we can do anything. But it's not us that's doing it, as the Course teaches. It's not the we that we think we are. It's not Michael. It's not Wanako. That's not who's doing it. It's the Christ that's doing it. It's the power of the word.
Very beautiful. Yeah. I would like to ask if anyone would like to comment or ask a question at this point. I think it's a good spot. Okay, then we'll continue. So, let's see. So these experiences of how standing in the light of Christ changed situations is something that you must have experienced very often to be able to speak about it so confidently at this point. How has it been lately?
Well, lately, my life has been really calm and uneventful. of course, there was that 2-year lockdown kind of, and it was really great. That's when I started having this Course in Miracles meeting every day on Zoom. And we would meet for an hour, sometimes longer. And ostensibly, we would be talking about the day's lesson. And we always did that. But it got to be more and more because it was the same three of us. And they'd all been in the order with me. And so they were there because they were course students initially, but we really got to know each other and be friends. And so all the stuff that you have to go through to drop all the ego stuff so that you are really seeing the Christ in each other, you have to deal with all your projections. And here's the funny thing. I guess this is something that I think is really important to say, is that when you come into the self, you still have an ego. You don't get rid of the ego. That wouldn't be of value to anybody. What would the Holy Spirit do if you had no ego? What would happen? Where would you go? Every one of us is a teacher, and every one of us is a student. And the people that we're supposed to meet, that's all set. It's like it's all set up. It's all part of the script, our dream. So we're going to meet these people. We're going to share our experience with. And you have to be yourself, You have to be this soul personality that has evolved over all these lifetimes. You have to be this being. And you have to work through all the ego stuff that you have in this lifetime with each other. These sacred relationships. And so that was all new to me, that all that teaching was new. It wasn't part of the order I was in. In fact, to do all the things that the order did, we went from like maybe 10 people in 1968 to 3,000 people in 1975 or 4. And we had centers in every state by that time. And you gotta work with egos to do stuff like that. And we had brothers, and we had priests, and we had ministers, and we had all these categories. We had teachers, and the ego wants to strive for the next achievement. And so there wasn't a whole lot of talk about the ego, except, of course, there was get yourself out of the way. Let the Christ come through. That was there for sure, but at the same time, this was our home. This is where we're going to live. So we had to establish ourselves. So there was ego. The idea of salvation being seeing Christ in your brother, seeing your brother as your savior, that kind of devotion wasn't there. It wasn't the same. Of course, on one level, it certainly was. but it wasn't the primary pathway that it is in the Course. We didn't look at it that way, but that's why I dropped all that order stuff to do the Course, because it was like a whole new level. When we ended up back in the world, having these relationships and, not being set apart from the world and leading ordinary lives and part of everybody. It's then that we started to face the same problems, because we had set all of those things aside. We didn't have a life of our own. And now we had to find a place in the world. We had to make it like everybody else, the same way. And we were all alone. I mean, our teacher said, let everyone be a school unto himself. Okay, so we really learned this stuff. We took it on. But it was easy to do in a group like that. But now, when we found ourselves out in the world, alone, we might have somebody with us, like my wife, also a priest, was, with me. We made it for 10 years. And we helped each other get through kind of establishing ourselves in the world so that we had a base to work from. And then it was over. And so what I feel like, okay, and I studied in many groups. I have been initiated as a Sufi, initiated as a Tibetan Buddhist, and all the time I'm looking for the freedom that the Course offers. But they all had their systems, and if you didn't totally do that and nothing else, you just weren't there. You were fine to be a participant, but there was no place for you as an ego. That was for people who really that was their primary path, and they had taken it on the same way I took on mine. And that's why the Course was so attractive, because it reaches out to every single person as a self-study course, so that you really have to dig down into your roots. I mean, I'm talking about your guts. You have to dig down into your guts and find your anchor in yourself. You have to question every belief. The ego is it's the thief who breaks in and steals in the New Testament. And I, of course, knew that well when I was in the order, because every time something really great would happen, something really great, something really spiritual, some powerful experience, the ego would come in and steal it. And it would think, I did this. So much BS. And, you had to constantly keep a watch on that. Because if you didn't, you would fall. And if you really didn't, you would fall hard. There was no room for that ego on the spiritual path. Well, it's the same thing now. But here we are, each of us appearing like an island in the world. And we're reaching for the same thing. We're reaching for the God inside of us. And we're running into all this interference. This ego who wants to be right and is always feeling attacked when there's no attack there. And then being defensive and then going back, going on the attack himself, etc. And the Course has so much to teach us about that. And it's so precious in that way. And so in a way, it's sort of like farther down the road for me. It's like, the idea that the farther you go, the narrower the path gets, until it's like the eye of the needle. In the New Testament, Jesus talked about that. That's how it is. And so there has to be less and less ego. And of course, on this, you see it in all the course groups, with everybody trying to correct each other and understanding the Course from an intellectual perspective, but not necessarily struggling with it inside themselves. It's like it's just us and God. Well, it's always been that way. We just didn't want to recognize it. Your turn.
I like that point. I'm very touched by what you're sharing, and you also shared how you went through these really strong emotions and you looked at them and you allowed yourself to experience them and not shun them or throw them out because they were coming up, and how healing that was.
Yeah. It was the only way I could do it. Other times, when I was 10 years old, I had polio. And so out of that, I had a scoliosis. I was kind of twisting in my body. Most of the time, it wasn't noticeable. It was a mild case. But as I got older, I would have these really, I had back pains, they'd be excruciating. And I had to do the same thing with that. I found, I got in this one time, I got into this, I was probably in my 50s by then. And it was like I couldn't go to work. I was like, all I could do was lie down. I managed to get to a chiropractor. And when I was on the table, I felt great after he was done. But as soon as my feet hit the floor, it was back again. And so I knew I wasn't going to get any help there. And I wasn't going to get any external help. I went home and I lay in bed and just feeling his pain. And I realized it was the same deal. I had to go into the pain mentally. And I did that. I just felt that pain. I went right. My goal was to go to the center of it. And I did. And it relaxed. The muscle tension relaxed and the nerve wasn't being pinched, and I was able to, calm it. And it's the same kind of thing. I remember long before I met the order, I was visiting my mother, and she had growing up, she would get these migraine headaches where we'd have to close all the windows and everything and make it dark and be quiet. And she would just be lying down for days, 2 or 3 days sometimes. So I was visiting her, and she had a book on her table called Psycho-Cybernetics. And it was about this kind of thing. So I had read the book, and I never got headaches, but this day I could feel it. Well, I should say never. So I felt a headache coming on. And I applied what I learned in the book, and I went mentally to the center of where the headache was starting. And it just, like that, was gone. And I've never had a headache since then. So that was like 23, maybe 22, 23. No headaches. It was the same kind of thing. And to me, it applies to everything that we do. It applies to dealing with the ego in any form or fashion that it manifests itself. There's no way around it. You can't fix it by changing things outside of you, as the Course says. You have to go inside. You have to deal with it. I'm studying a kind of astrology that deals with what it calls the 3 worlds approach. So you got the celestial, you got mundane reality, 3-dimension, then you got the underworld. Well, that's where all the opposition is. That's where the ego lives, We have to go into that. So when we look at the whatever problems we have, or when we look at it with the Holy Spirit, as the Course says, that's what we're doing. Whether we think of it as looking at it with the Holy Spirit or just putting all of our attention on it and feeling it, we have to go through it. Like that gospel song. It's so high, you can't get over it. It's so low, you can't get under it. It's so wide, you can't get around it. You have to go through the door. You have to go through the pain, the suffering, the anger, the fear. But you don't have to suffer. You just have to go through it. Because it really isn't real. We make it real. And we have to take that belief in it away.
Wow. very powerful processes you're speaking of. And it's something that we all need at times.
Yeah.
Or even just because something comes up. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's time to wrap up. So,
Okay.
is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to share before we wrap up?
No, I really feel like the things that I've been thinking about lately are have been said.
Wonderful. Yeah. Then let's go to the how can one reach you if one wants to reach you, and please give me all the links that you want to give me so I can put them in the show notes afterwards. And yeah. And so thank you so much for being here today. It was a wonderful conversation. I think there's a lot to take home with us after having heard what you went through, and now you covered your bases basically one after the other in your life, and you still are. And yeah, so thank you everyone for listening and watching. Please subscribe to the podcast, spread the word, let other people know about it, and review it so that more people find it. And thank you so much, Michael.
You're welcome. Thank you.